Welcome. Why is biotech limping right now?
Well, a little bit it's related to what's going on with the FDA, in my view. There have been a fair amount of regulatory delays, so approvals for new drugs. Some of them are related to COVID, effectively being able to kind of go to the manufacturing sites and do the due diligence needed to complete the approval process. So, we've seen a lot of delays, some complete response letters, and obviously like approving drugs in the regulatory environment is like a key lifeblood for the biotech space.
So investors know that. They know there's a bottleneck there. Are they concerned as well about either a changing attitude at the FDA or the possibility of more pricing pressures, price controls, government pressure on the pricing?
Got it. Two parts. So on the regulatory side, I worry a little bit. There's a change of tone. I mean, obviously, there's different leadership in place, different deputy heads, and all that stuff matters, right, as to what the agreements were that companies had with the prior people who were in the place versus the ones they have with new people as far as like the agreements on what clinical trials need to be run. So I worry, and I think investors worry from speaking to a lot of my clients, that there's some sort of changing tenor that's hard for us to pick up on a little bit, mostly because we don't work at the FDA. But on your second point, as it relates to pricing, I actually feel like, COVID was a kind of a systemic positive for pricing in biotech because, biotech is part of the solution, not part of the problem. And evidence and point that we have a vaccine in a year that's being mass disseminated, that's safe and efficacious, shows you like how much, why drugs cost a lot sometimes, right? Because these companies have to keep reinvesting in their pipelines and having things on the shelf. And so I think, overall, the governmental pricing pressure which will exist will be lower, than it has been in the past couple of years. Because I think, obviously the government kind of sees biotech, biopharma space as partners.
Alethea, it's Morgan. I'm curious about the tax reform, the corporate tax rate discussion that's going on and the possibility of reforms, what that could do to the sector.
It always puts some pressure, in my view, on the sector. I do think, corporate tax reform is a challenging concept to kind of tackle overall. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit of rhetoric. Obviously, a couple of years ago, it did occur and tax rates were a little lower. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of it's obviously a little bit of a headwind, but I think it's not, kind of completely the whole crushing factor of what stresses people out. Like I go back to drugs being approved and like the functional part of the environment versus like, is the tax rate X versus Y? Because, effectively you're always kind of able to kind of figure out different things to manage the corporate tax rate. And it's actually quite low at the moment. All
right. So given this entire conversation, we've just hit on a broad range of topics and factors here. What do you like the best?
As far as stocks go,
yep.
I really like this company, Global Blood. The stock is down a fair amount from the past 12 months. They have a sickle cell drug called Oxbryta that was just approved right when the pandemic started. And, the launch started off pretty good, but as we dug into the pandemic, like March 2020, obviously patients weren't going to the doctor and they weren't looking for new medicines. Everybody was just at home and the doctors weren't even at home and had to learn how to treat patients with telemedicine versus seeing them. And so the launch has waned because of that. But I think, we're kind of heading out of the pandemic, fingers crossed, I really hope. And I think that, we're going to slowly start seeing a systemic recovery as far as patients going to get new medicines and things like that. And I think this is still a very meaningful medicine blockbuster product. So I feel like as we head into the second half of the year, Global Blood is a stock that, one should own as we kind of play the recovery storyline for them.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.